You thought you had overcome it, but the pain returned silently as if it had never left. She didn't scream. She didn't impose herself. She simply reappeared, like an echo of what you swore you'd left behind. Rumi wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters." But what if this light is showing you exactly what you still refuse to see? Maybe you are not suffering for the one who hurt you, but because you stayed too long where you were never really seen. How many times have you silenced your pain to keep someone who ignored you close? How many times have you been a constant presence in lives where you were just an option? You gave so much of yourself that you forgot that love is not sacrifice. It's reciprocity. It is a look that recognizes. It is a soul that welcomes. But when the other person ignores you, when he treats you like you're invisible, like your absence is a relief, it's natural for something inside you to break. But what breaks also reveals. Rumi said, "You have to keep breaking your heart until it opens." And maybe that's exactly what's happening to you right now. You are not broken. It's opening up to see the truth you tried to ignore, just so you don't lose someone. But now, you feel it. You see. You know. Whoever ignored you didn't do it out of carelessness. I did it because I knew you would always be there. Because his presence was guaranteed. Because your love was given, even without being deserved. And now, you've withdrawn. You walked away, even if silently. You stopped insisting. You chose not to explain yourself further. And do you know what will happen? Absence will speak louder than any words. Your withdrawal will echo in the heart that ignored you. Because whoever loses a true soul only realizes the emptiness when it is too late. The silence of your absence is more deafening than any scream. Because those who are used to being a priority only when it suits them, you will feel it. You will remember. Go beg. And not because you missed it on purpose, but because you finally chose yourself. This is not revenge. It's emotional justice. It's self-care. It is the natural return of the soul that is tired of begging in the name of love. You no longer need to chase after those who ignore you. You no longer need to explain yourself to those who never wanted to understand you. You are not needy. You are a rare presence. And when a rare presence withdraws, the world feels it, even if it takes time, even if they deny it, even if they don't admit it. What hurt you, now learn from its absence. And you, for the first time, breathe outside the pain. But it still hurts, doesn't it? There is still an echo. There is still a part of you that asks, if I walked away, why does it still hurt? If he ignored me, why do I still expect him to miss me? The answer is hidden where Rumi's light shines brightest. Maybe you have healed the wound, but it still carries the attachment to history. And that's what we're going to talk about now. Maybe what still hurts you isn't the person's absence, but the absence of yourself. Every time you begged for emotional crumbs, because you gave too much and received too little. And that leaves marks. You may have physically distanced yourself, but internally, there is still a part of you that waits to be recognized. There is still a secret hope that the other person will realize how essential you were. But here's a truth that few have the courage to face. You no longer hurt for love. You hurt because of a lack of value. Because when someone ignores you, it's not just the presence that hurts. It's what that absence makes you believe about yourself. Were you really that disposable? Was his presence really so easy to forget? Are you worth so little? These questions, even without answers, keep hammering away. And the cruelest thing is that, on the outside you already said, I'm over it. But inside, there is still an emptiness that insists on asking, what if he only misses me after I'm really gone? This is the invisible problem. The wound has been stitched up, but the soul still bleeds inside. And if you've made it this far, it's because it speaks to you. With your silent pain, with your tired heart. So tell me, have you ever been ignored by someone who claimed to care? Have you ever retired and still feel the weight of not being enough? Comment below. My absence also speaks. This comment is not just a text. It is an act of force. It's you taking a stand. It's you recognizing that your silence also has power. And if this touched your soul in any way, leave a like now. This shows me, and you, that this content makes sense. And yes, subscribe to the channel, because here, we don't just speak with our minds. We speak with pain, with the soul, with what no one taught you to listen to. Let's go down deeper. Real healing begins now. Have you ever felt that even after walking away, forgiving, writing 1,000 letters you never sent? It still hurts? And this pain no longer has a face, no longer a name, no longer a fight. It just exists, silent, persistent, like an echo that lives within you, even when everything around you seems to have calmed down. Sometimes you think you've moved on. You smile, move on, talk to others, make plans. But all it takes is a song, a memory, a smell, a street, and the wound throbs again. And you think, but hadn't I already left this behind? Maybe so. Maybe you left the person. Maybe you even left the relationship. But you didn't leave the feeling of absence behind. What remained wasn't him. It was the emptiness he left behind. This is the invisible problem that almost no one talks about. People believe that getting over someone means erasing the story, that all it takes is to stop talking, block or ignore. But what hurts isn't the memory, it's the meaning. It's what that person represented while you were there, present, giving of yourself, waiting to be seen, and being ignored. Pain doesn't reside solely in what happened. It resides in what you felt for not having been important to someone who meant everything to you. It's in this place that emptiness settles, not in the loss itself, but in the silent humiliation of having offered yourself completely and yet still being treated as excess. How many times have you tried to be softer, more understanding, quieter, just to avoid bothering someone? How many times have you remained silent in the face of someone's coldness, afraid of seeming too intense? How many times have you normalized disinterest just to stay close to someone who didn't care about keeping you? It's tiring. It makes you sick. And this exhaustion builds up, not in your body, but in your soul, because the soul feels when it's not welcomed. It feels when it needs to hide to fit into the space of someone who constantly diminishes you with their neglect. And you shrink, mold yourself, trying to be what the other person wants, until one day you realize you've stopped being yourself. Then comes the withdrawal, the silence, the distancing. You decide to stop insisting. You decide to leave. You decide, finally, to choose yourself. But what almost no one tells you is that, even after this choice, the pain can remain. And not because you want to return, but because your heart still hasn't understood why it hurt so much not to be seen. Maybe you're carrying more than the pain of absence. Maybe you're carrying the weight of having lost yourself, trying to be enough for someone who never had eyes to truly see you. And that's one of the hardest weights to let go of, because deep down, you didn't just want his love. You wanted validation. You wanted to feel that for once you were the one chosen without having to beg for it. But you know what happens when you've been ignored for so long? You start to convince yourself you really weren't good enough. And this silent belief taints everything. You walk away, but still feel small. You end the relationship, but still carry the guilt. You say you've moved on, but still wonder what more you could have done. This is the cycle of silent pain. The pain of someone who leaves but still bleeds inside. And this isn't weakness. This is human. This is you, trying to make sense of a kind of abandonment that wasn't expressed in words but was experienced in absences. Ignoring is also a form of violence. It's the kind that doesn't scream, but leaves scars. It's the kind that doesn't humiliate with words, but nullifies with indifference. And you felt it, many times, when you sent a message and got no response. When you tried to talk and were interrupted with contempt. When you made plans and were treated like an exaggeration. When you expected a hug and were met with silence. All of this left scars, not visible, but real. And those are the ones that hurt the most, because you start to doubt your own perception. You start to wonder if you weren't overreacting, if you weren't expecting too much. And then you shut up. You learn to swallow, to accept less, to diminish yourself. And that's how the invisible problem grows. It feeds on your silence, on your attempt to rationalize what, deep down, was pure emotional disrespect. Rumi said that the heart needs to be broken until it opens. Maybe this is your break. The moment when you can no longer pretend everything is okay. When you recognize that you were ignored, yes. That it hurt, yes. That it affected you in a way you didn't want to admit, even to yourself. But admitting it is the first step to breaking out of this cycle, because when you look at this pain honestly, it begins to lose its power to control you. You stop chasing answers that others will never give you, and you start searching within yourself for what you've always hoped to receive. And this is where we dig deeper, because maybe the question is no longer, why did he ignore me? But rather, why did I put up with this for so long? If this is speaking to your soul right now, comment below. I am no longer silence in anyone's life. This sentence may seem small, but it carries your decision, and perhaps it's the first step toward reconnecting with the strength that's always been yours. Rumi said, "You have to keep breaking your heart until it opens." And that phrase isn't a metaphor for beautiful poetry. It's a mirror, a direct reflection of the journey your soul is facing right now, because the pain you feel isn't just emotional. It's not just the result of a relationship gone wrong or someone who ignored you. The pain persists because the wound wasn't just an experience. It was a portal, a spiritual lesson your soul asked to pass through, but it hasn't yet been integrated. And as long as you keep trying to heal with logic what arose from the soul, you'll continue to feel this emptiness. Because it's not the other person who needs to change. It's not them who needs to come back. It's not them who needs to understand everything you felt. The truth is, awakening doesn't come with the return of the person who left you. Awakening comes when you stop waiting for them to understand. It comes when you accept that what happened wasn't a mistake. It was a calling. You went through this rejection to see something deeper. And maybe what needs to be seen now isn't about the other person, but about yourself, about your repetitions, about your surrender, about your emptiness hidden behind love. Because yes, often the love you felt wasn't just for him. It was for the idea of being enough. It was for the hope of finally being chosen. It was the desperate desire to feel valued, even if it cost you your peace. And here lies the root, the point where the spiritual and emotional intersect. You didn't suffer just because you were ignored. You suffered because this indifference activated within you all the times you were unseen as a child, all the times you had to strive to be loved, all the times you learned that love must be earned, and carried on your shoulders. The pain isn't new, it's just taken on a new story, and until you recognize it, it repeats itself. The name changes, the face changes, but the feeling is always the same. Abandonment, rejection, emptiness, effort, frustration, and the soul exhausted accumulates. Until one day it screams. It screams in the silence. It screams in the insomnia. It screams in the anxiety that appears without explanation. It screams in the desire to disappear and be truly found by someone. But no one will find you as long as you keep losing yourself, trying to please. No one will recognize you as long as you keep hiding to fit in with the love of others. It takes courage to look at yourself, to stop blaming others, to say, maybe he ignored me. But I also ignored the signs. I ignored my intuition. I ignored my exhaustion. I ignored my limits. I ignored how much this was already killing me inside. The spiritual root of pain isn't in the story itself. It's in the repetition of what you've been doing to your own essence. Every time you surrender yourself completely, hoping someone else will save you, you're forgetting yourself. Every time you stay, even when everything inside you is begging you to leave, you're betraying yourself. And the price of that isn't just a broken heart. The price of that is the distancing of your soul. Rumi also said, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." But how do you remember this when you've been reduced to almost nothing in a relationship? How do you feel like an ocean when you've been treated like trash? The answer lies in the pain. Because the pain that hurts today is the same one that's trying to remind you of who you are. It doesn't want to punish you. It wants to awaken you. It's screaming, "Hey, look at you. Remember who you were before you begged for love. Remember what you believed before you convinced yourself you needed to deserve affection. Remember how your light shone before someone convinced you you were too much." That's why the pain doesn't truly go away as long as you keep trying to resolve on the outside what arose on the inside. Healing begins when you understand that rejection wasn't the end. It was the beginning of your reunion. The problem is that most people stop halfway. They feel the pain, but distract themselves. They distance themselves but fill themselves with anything just to avoid having to face the emptiness. But emptiness isn't an enemy. Emptiness is an invitation. The emptiness you feel today can be the cradle of your rebirth. It's the space where everything that isn't you falls apart. It's the ground where you finally rebuild yourself. But only if you have the courage to stay, to cross over, to feel, without rushing, without skipping steps, without getting distracted by new illusions. Because the soul knows, It knows when you're distracted, it knows when you're running away, it knows when you're still waiting to be recognized by someone who can't see you. And that's when the cycle begins again. So stop now. Look at this pain as a teacher, not as a punishment, as a guide, not as a burden. Ask her, what are you trying to show me? What does this situation want me to learn? What still keeps me stuck in this story? What inside me keeps trying to seek outside what it will only find within? And maybe the answer comes in the silence, or maybe it comes now, as you hear these words, because deep down you already know, your soul already knew. It just needed someone to say out loud what it had been whispering for so long. Comment below, I go through the pain with my soul awake. This phrase is a vow, an agreement with yourself, and perhaps it's the beginning of the transformation your soul is begging for. Let's go deeper still. The next key is already arriving. What no one told you is, you can heal the wound and still be stuck in the story. You may no longer miss the person, no longer wish to return, no longer want any contact, and yet continue to carry within your chest the vivid memory of what that absence made you believe about yourself. Because it's not always the absence of the other that hurts. Often, what silently tears you apart is the meaning you gave to the fact that you weren't chosen. You may say you've overcome it, but you still doubt your worth. You may claim you've forgiven, but you still avoid places, songs, and words that remind you of them. You may have erased the name, the photos, the traces, but deep down, something is still tied to it. Because the story doesn't end when the other person leaves. It only ends when you stop identifying with the pain they left behind. And that, my dear, takes time. Rumi said that one must allow the soul to be stripped of all that is non-essential. And perhaps this pain is precisely that. A forced withdrawal of what wasn't yours but which you thought you needed. His attention, his gaze, his validation, his love. And remember, it's not wrong to desire love. It's not weakness to have given of yourself. The soul craves connection. The soul yearns for encounters that make it blossom. But when neediness disguises itself as love, it pushes us into stories that seem like destiny, but are merely mirrors of our wounds. And then, even when the relationship ends, the cycle continues, because the person leaves, but the narrative remains. That silent voice that says, if he ignored you, maybe you weren't that important. If she chose someone else, maybe you weren't enough. If he walked away without explanation, maybe you were just easy to leave. And you believe it. You internalize it. You turn the other person's absence into evidence against yourself. And that's when you get stuck. You no longer suffer for the person. You suffer for what you began to believe about yourself after they left. The real prison isn't in the memory, but in the identity you built from it. And this is the hidden key that almost no one notices. You've healed the wound, but you still carry the name of the pain as your surname. You keep telling yourself, I'm the one who was left. I'm the one who is never a priority. I'm the one who always loves more. And this shapes your future relationships, your future choices, even the way you look in the mirror. But it doesn't have to be this way. Because the soul is not meant to live trapped in narratives born of abandonment. It wasn't born to eternally repeat the role of victim. It was born to transmute, to transform pain into wisdom, wounds into art, silence into truth. But to do so, you need to let go of the story that holds you back. Not the memory, not what you experienced, but the interpretation you gave to it all. Because you see, just because someone ignored you doesn't mean you weren't worthy of love. Just because someone replaced you doesn't prove you were replaceable. Just because someone remained silent doesn't mean you were hard to love. It just means they couldn't see you. And that doesn't say anything about your worth. It says something about their emotional blindness, about their inability to recognize the sacred when they had it right in front of their eyes. But as long as you keep trying to find the reason for your pain in the other person's actions, you'll remain trapped. Because true healing doesn't happen when the other person acknowledges their mistake. True healing happens when you understand that you no longer need this story to validate who you are. When you consciously choose to break the cycle of abandoning yourself every time someone rejects you. This is the hidden key. Realizing that the pain only remains because you still need it to sustain an identity you learn to live from lack. And that's okay. For a while. For a while, this pain protected you. It helped you understand limits. It helped you recognize patterns. But now, maybe it's already served its purpose, and you're just insisting on carrying a weight that no longer belongs to you. The other person's absence hurt you, but it was you who kept going back inside, like someone reopening the same door hoping for a different ending. It was you who kept the memory like a frame and forgot to look beyond the image it carried. It was you who accepted that story as defining your sensitivity, your dedication, your beauty. But today, perhaps for the first time, you're ready to let go, to untie the knot, to return pain to the place it should never have left, that of a messenger, not a sentence, not a prison, just a message, a summons, a call from the soul saying, it's time to come back to yourself. Because the love you offered wasn't wasted, it was a seed. And even if the other person's soil was too arid to flourish, the soil of your soul remains fertile. It continues to pulse. It continues to love with greater wisdom, with greater discernment, with greater truth, but without begging, without diminishing yourself. You're not here to be understood by those who only see the surface. You're not here to be half in the name of a love that demands silence. You're here to live whole, and that begins when you choose to free yourself from the story pain has told you about who you are. Comment below. I release the story that no longer belongs to me. Write this down as a seal, as a silent release, because sometimes all the soul needs is a small act of courage to finally free itself from its own prison. And when that liberation begins, nothing can hold you back anymore. Let's continue. The next revelation awaits. Perhaps you walked away from someone who ignored you, hoping that peace would come with silence, hoping that, by withdrawing, relief would arrive. And on the surface, it seemed like it had. After all, there are no more unanswered messages, no more that feeling of offering yourself in vain, no more that constant attempt to be present in the life of someone who acted as if you were always a nuisance. But deep down, the peace you hoped for didn't come whole. It came broken. It came mixed with a bitter taste of emptiness and a silent doubt. If I chose to leave, why does it still hurt? And maybe the answer isn't in what the other person did. Maybe what hurts now isn't the person anymore, but the echo of the question that remained unanswered within you. Why did I accept so little for so long? This is the question that screams when silence sets in, when there are no more excuses, no presents, no promises. It's when everything ceases that your soul begins to speak, and it speaks firmly, not to blame you, but to wake you up. Let's be honest for a moment. How many times have you felt alone even when you were with someone? How many times have you read and reread messages, hoping for a response that never came? How many times have you accepted emotional scraps, just because the thought of being completely ignored was worse than any pain? How many times have you recalculated every word, every gesture, just to avoid appearing needy? How many times have you set aside your own needs to fit in with what someone else wanted? This example isn't far off. It's real, and it may have been yours. Perhaps you've been in a relationship where you felt your presence was a favor, where your love was more of a burden than a gift, where you were remembered only when convenient, only when useful, only when there was nothing more interesting. And yet, you stayed, because you believed that at some point, the other person would see who you were, because deep down, you held the hope that if you loved enough, it would be impossible not to be loved back. But then came the withdrawal, not as revenge, not as manipulation, but as a gesture of emotional survival, because you realized that persisting was no longer a sign of love. It was a kind of self-abandonment, and when you left, the world didn't fall apart. The person didn't chase you, there was no apology. There was no confession of love. There was only silence. And it was in that silence that you began to hear yourself, for the first time in a long time. And what you heard wasn't pretty. It was a mirror. It was an avalanche of painful realizations, that you put yourself last, that you mistook intensity for reciprocity, that you mistook presence for connection, that you mistook being needed for being loved. And what remained, more than longing, was shame. Shame for having diminished yourself. Shame for having accepted being invisible. Shame for having bent so far for so little. But this shame is also key. It points to your humanity, to your lack of love, of belonging, of recognition. And acknowledging this doesn't make you weak. It makes you real. Because everyone, at some level, has begged for attention disguised as affection. They've confused attachment with love. They've played a role just to avoid losing someone. The difference is that now, you see it. And when you see it, you can no longer fool yourself. You can no longer romanticize what hurt you. You can no longer idealize those who always ignored you. The spell is broken, and what remains is a raw, yet liberating pain. Because this pain no longer depends on someone else. It's yours. It's a pain born from the recognition that you deserve more, that you always deserved it, but you weren't aware of it yet. You began this journey thinking the problem was the other person, and maybe for a while it was. But now, you understand that the root lies deeper. It's in the part of you that thought it was normal to be ignored, that thought it was acceptable to love alone, that learned to call love what was actually just a disguised absence of connection. And the most painful part of all this is that, at some point, you knew. Deep down, you already felt it wasn't love, but you chose to believe what you wanted to hear instead of listening to what your soul screamed. And that's okay. It's all right, because this too is part of awakening. Rumi said that the soul needs to be broken until it becomes truly free. And maybe that's your liberation now, accepting that what hurt wasn't the end of the relationship, but the weight of everything you allowed while fighting for something that never acknowledged you. Maybe your story is exactly that. You no longer miss the person, but you still wonder how you were able to accept so little for so long. And that question may continue to echo, or it may become an answer, a living answer, in the form of a choice. The choice to never return to where you lost yourself. The choice to not remain silent in the face of discomfort. The choice to no longer wait to be seen by eyes that only see what suits them. Now you know. You know that your silence isn't weakness, it's maturity. You know that your absence isn't punishment, it's respect. You know that the pain that remains isn't longing, it's the scar of the healing process. And if you've made it this far, perhaps your soul is finally ready to take the next step. The step of someone who not only walked away, but chose not to lose themselves to anyone again. Comment below. Now I recognize my worth. This phrase isn't an answer to the other person. It's a silent promise you make to yourself, an affirmation that breaks the cycle, a seed that can finally blossom in the fertile ground of your awakened soul. We're not done yet. The next turning point is closer than you think. Rumi reveals, you were born with wings. Why crawl through life? This question has the soft weight of a whisper and the impact of a revelation, because it doesn't speak to the part of you that survives, that repeats patterns, that drags itself through the days trying to forget what hurt. It speaks to the forgotten part, to the dormant essence, to the soul that has grown tired of crawling in the name of loves that never elevated you. And perhaps this is the moment when you truly begin to remember who you are, because the pain you felt, feel, or still feel isn't proof that you're stuck in the past. It's not a sign of weakness, nor that you haven't done enough. Pain is just a reminder that your soul wants more than just survival. It wants to awaken. It wants to free itself from the roles it's been placed in. It wants to stop fitting into relationships that require you to diminish yourself. And for that to happen, a shift is needed. Not from the world, but from within. This shift in consciousness begins when you stop asking yourself, why did he do this to me? And start reflecting, why did I accept treating myself so poorly for someone else? Change happens when you stop looking for blame and start seeking meaning. When the story stops being a wound and becomes a portal. When the narrative stops being a repetition and becomes an expansion. You crawled, yes. You crawled for validation, for attention, for crumbs. You crawled out of fear of being alone, out of attachment to the promise that maybe one day it would be enough, out of hope that the other, at some point, would see you. And that crawling was painful. It made you lose the sparkle in your eyes, the spontaneity, the lightness. It made you question if love was really for you. But today, looking back, with more clarity, perhaps you realize, love was always for you. Just not this superficial love of silence, of disinterest camouflaged by physical presence. The love you deserve is the one that doesn't ask you to crawl, and then consciousness awakens. You remember who you were before everything. You remember your power, your capacity to love deeply, to give yourself wholeheartedly, to see the other beyond appearances. And when that memory arrives, there's no going back. You might even feel nostalgic. You might even slip into thoughts that romanticize the past. But your body no longer accepts that place. Your soul no longer allows that kind of shallow love. Because you saw, you understood, you crossed over. And crossing over is a lonely process. sometimes silent, often painful, because there's no audience. No one applauds the moment you tearfully tell yourself, "I'm not coming back." No one sees the night you delete all your conversations, not because you hate, but because you need to heal. No one sees the exact moment your heart, still broken, decides to rebuild itself without waiting for the other person to return. But the soul sees, it feels, and it responds. She responds with courage, with integrity, with a new sense of lightness that, little by little, replaces the pain. And you begin to notice signs. A peace that once seemed impossible. A morning when you wake up and no longer think about him as you used to. A spontaneous laugh. A desire to start over. To reconnect with what moves you. This is awakening. It's not shouting to the world that everything is okay. It's feeling silently that the worst no longer defines you. This turning point isn't spectacle. It's truth. And truth doesn't need proof. It just needs to be felt. Perhaps that's why at this moment you're realizing you no longer need to crawl. Because what you sought in others was already within you. And now, you can finally spread your wings. Not to fly toward someone else, but to return to yourself, to your wholeness, to your light. You are not the pain you experienced. You are the one who survived the pain. You are the one who decided not to be reduced to what the other saw or didn't see. You are the one who said enough not only to the relationship, but to the entire distorted idea of love that imprisoned your essence. And this decision, even silent, changes everything. It changes your energy, your outlook, your presence. And the most beautiful thing, it doesn't require anyone to understand. Because those who awaken no longer need to be understood. They just need to move on. This new awareness shows you that true love doesn't hurt like that. That the love you deserve doesn't ask you to beg. That real connection doesn't require you to hide. And even more, it shows you that true peace isn't found in the other person changing. It's found in you, ultimately, choosing yourself. And if you now feel that something inside you has changed, even if you can't explain exactly what, perhaps it's time to pause and simply acknowledge what's happening. Perhaps your soul is breathing again. Perhaps your light is slowly breaking through its cocoon. Perhaps you are indeed being reborn. Comment below, "I no longer crawl for love." This simple phrase carries your decision. It marks your new path. And it could be the beginning of a lifetime lived with open wings. We still have more to reveal. The journey continues. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you is ready to change. Perhaps your soul has been waiting for this very moment. The moment you stop seeking healing from others for what can only be resolved within. You've healed the wound. Now, heal the need to return to where it originated. This video was a portal, a mirror, a breath of fresh air. But the journey doesn't end here. If this message spoke to your truth, then you already know. This channel is your place of refuge, of awakening, of reconnection. Sign up now and walk with me on this spiritual journey of deep healing, living poetry, and a liberated soul. Leave your like, not because of the algorithm, but as a sign that you recognized yourself in every word. Now take a deep breath and move on to the next video that's appearing on your screen. It's the continuation of this journey. It's for you, because your story is still being written.